The first thing I see is her finger shaking as she points it inches from my face. Her voice is so loud it echoes across the lake, sending a flock of birds scattering from the trees. You have exactly 15 minutes to comply before I call the police. She snaps, clutching her phone like it's a weapon. I'm standing on the wooden porch of my grandfather's 100-year-old cabin, coffee still warm in my hand, watching one of the most ridiculous scenes I've witnessed in years. And that's saying something, considering I've spent nearly 3 decades working federal investigations. The woman in front of me, perfect hair, designer sunglasses pushed onto her head, tennis outfit that probably costs more than my monthly grocery bill, is practically vibrating with anger. This property is in violation of multiple HOA regulations. She continues, waving a thick packet of papers. And if you don't start making corrections immediately, I will have you removed from this community. Removed from my own land. I glance past her toward the calm water of the lake behind my cabin. The morning mist is still drifting across the surface, and somewhere out there a loon calls into the quiet. It would almost be peaceful if this woman wasn't currently losing her mind on my front porch. Ma'am, I say slowly, trying to keep the conversation somewhere near reality. This cabin has been here since 1923. She scoffs like I just told a joke. That doesn't matter. She snaps. Whitefish Estates maintains strict aesthetic standards. Your cabin is outdated, poorly maintained, and frankly, it's dragging down property values. Her eyes sweep across the stacked firewood beside the porch. My grandfather's old Ford truck parked near the trees. The weathered logs of the cabin itself. Everything about this place clearly offends her. You have peeling wood, exposed storage piles, unauthorized structures, and unapproved landscaping. She continues, tapping her clipboard dramatically. Then her lips curl into a smug little smile. And if you think ignoring HOA regulations will work, you're about to learn a very expensive lesson. Before I can respond, she lifts her phone and dials. Yes, hello, she says loudly into the speaker. I'd like to report a hostile property owner refusing lawful HOA enforcement. I feel threatened and unsafe. I take another slow sip of coffee while she talks to the dispatcher. Because here's the thing she doesn't know yet. In about 60 seconds, when those police cars come flying up this driveway with lights flashing, this entire situation is going to flip upside down. And the moment she finds out who she just tried to have arrested, her world is going to implode. 2 sheriff's cruisers came tearing down the gravel road toward my cabin, lights flashing through the trees like a police chase in a movie. The sound of sirens shattered the quiet morning lake air, echoing across the water. The woman standing in my driveway folded her arms with a smug smile spreading across her face. "Oh good," she said loudly, making sure I could hear every word. "Now we'll see how tough you act when real authority shows up." I leaned against the porch railing and watched the patrol cars roll to a stop beside the cabin. Gravel crunched under their tires as the engines shut off. Two deputies stepped out. Both of them looked slightly confused, probably because the scene in front of them didn't exactly match the emergency call they'd received. On one side, a middle-aged woman in designer sportswear, practically vibrating with rage. On the other, a guy standing calmly on a porch holding a coffee mug. The woman marched straight toward them. "Officers, thank God you're here," she said dramatically. "This man is refusing to comply with HOA enforcement and is behaving in a threatening manner. I want him removed from this property immediately." One of the deputies looked past her at me. "Sir," he said cautiously, "what's going on here?" Before I could even answer, she cut in again. "This property is in violation of multiple community regulations. I am the president of the Whitefish Estates Homeowners Association, and he's refusing to cooperate." She shoved a stack of papers toward them like it was some kind of legal death sentence. The deputies glanced at the documents, then back at the cabin, then back at me. I finally stepped off the porch. "Morning, deputies," I said calmly. The taller one nodded. "Morning. Mind explaining the situation?" The woman jumped in again, clearly determined to control the narrative. "He's intentionally ignoring lawful HOA orders," she insisted. "I believe he may be impersonating law enforcement as well. He claimed to be a federal agent to intimidate me." That actually made me laugh. The deputies both raised their eyebrows. "You did what?" the shorter deputy asked. I reached slowly into my jacket pocket. Her eyes lit up like she was watching someone dig their own grave. "Oh, perfect," she said. "Go ahead. Try to bluff them too." I pulled out my wallet and flipped it open. Inside was a badge and identification that instantly changed the atmosphere around the driveway. Both deputies leaned closer. Then their posture shifted. The taller one cleared his throat. "Special Agent Garrett Blackwood." I nodded, and the woman behind them went completely silent, because the man she had just called the police on wasn't some random homeowner. He was a senior FBI agent standing on his own property. For about 3 seconds, nobody said a word. The wind coming off the lake rustled the pine trees behind the cabin, and the only sound in the driveway was the quiet crackle of gravel under someone shifting their weight. The deputies were staring at my badge. The HOA president was staring at my face, and the smug confidence she'd been wearing just moments ago was slowly draining away. "FBI," she finally said, her voice cracking slightly like the word tasted bad. "Yes, Mom," the taller deputy replied before I even could. "Senior Special Agent Garrett Blackwood." Her eyes snapped toward the deputy. "That can't be right," she said quickly. "He's lying. He told me that earlier to try and intimidate me." I closed my wallet and slid it back into my jacket. "No," I said calmly. "I told you because it's true." The deputies were already shifting into a much more relaxed posture. The shorter one gave me a respectful nod. "Sorry about the disturbance, Agent Blackwood," Dispatch said the caller reported a threatening property owner refusing lawful orders. I gestured lightly toward the cabin behind me. My grandfather built that place in 1923. I explained. It's been in my family for 100 years. Apparently, that's a problem for the local HOA. Both deputies glanced toward the woman. She straightened immediately, trying to recover control. This property is inside the Whitefish Estates community, she insisted sharply, and every property inside the community must comply with HOA regulations. I tilted my head slightly. Interesting claim. She immediately pulled out her clipboard again, flipping through papers like she was presenting evidence in court. Peeling exterior wood, unauthorized storage piles, unapproved vehicle parking, non-compliant architectural structure. She listed rapidly, pointing toward my grandfather's cabin, like it was a crime scene. Then she looked back at the deputies. I gave him a 15-day compliance notice. He refused to cooperate and began acting aggressively. Both deputies looked at me. I shrugged and took another sip of coffee. Define aggressive, I said. The shorter deputy rubbed the back of his neck, clearly realizing the call might not have been exactly what it sounded like. "Ma'am," he said carefully, "being in violation of HOA rules isn't typically a criminal matter." Her face flushed red. "But he refuses to obey community regulations?" "That's still a civil issue," the deputy explained. Her jaw tightened. Then she pointed directly at my cabin again. "This structure is lowering the value of every home in this neighborhood." I followed her finger with my eyes, looking at the weathered logs of the cabin, the dock stretching out into the lake, and the tall pine trees surrounding the property. Then I looked back at her. "Here's the funny part," I said. The deputies both turned slightly toward me. "Before you called the police," I continued calmly, "I spent the weekend digging through county records." Her expression flickered. "And I found something very interesting." Now all three of them were looking at me, because the truth I'd uncovered was about to ruin her entire plan. The moment I said I'd been digging through county records, the confidence drained out of her face. Just a little more. Most people don't realize something about federal investigators. When we get suspicious, we don't guess. We dig, and once we start digging, we don't stop until we hit bedrock. I set my coffee mug down on the porch railing and looked directly at her. "You said my property is inside your HOA jurisdiction," I said calmly. She lifted her chin. "It is." "You're sure about that?" "Absolutely," she snapped. "Every property along this shoreline is part of Whitefish Estates." The deputies glanced at each other. Even they could feel the tension tightening in the air. I reached into my back pocket and pulled out a folded set of documents. Old copies. Stamped. Recorded. The kind of paperwork most people never bother looking for. But I had spent 6 hours in the dusty basement of the Flathead County Courthouse, finding them. I unfolded the papers slowly and handed them to the taller deputy. "You might want to read the highlighted section," I said. He scanned the document. Then his eyebrows slowly lifted. What is it? The other deputy asked. The taller one turned the paper toward him. Original land deed, filed 1923. Then he read the highlighted line out loud. Property designated under historical territorial land grant protections. Exempt from future residential covenant enforcement unless voluntarily annexed by owner. He looked up at me. You never joined the HOA. I smiled. Exactly. The woman's face turned a deep shade of red. That's ridiculous, she snapped. Every property in this development is governed by the association. Except mine, I said. The deputies both turned toward her. You might want to see the county maps. I continued. Whitefish Estates was incorporated in 2019. She said nothing. My grandfather's cabin predates your HOA by 96 years. The shorter deputy gave a low whistle. Well, that's awkward. She stepped forward, voice rising. That document doesn't matter. The community standards still apply to neighboring properties. I shook my head slowly. No, they don't. Then I pulled out a second document. The actual HOA incorporation filing. The section I had highlighted practically glowed under the sunlight. I handed it over. The deputy read quietly, then looked back at her. Mom, your own bylaws say the association has no enforcement authority over pre-existing historical properties. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again. For the first time since she stormed onto my property, she didn't have a response ready. The wind rustled the trees again as the silence stretched. Then the shorter deputy spoke carefully. So let me get this straight. He gestured toward me. You called 911 because a man wouldn't follow HOA rules. He turned toward her. That legally don't apply to him. Her jaw tightened. But what she didn't realize yet was that this embarrassing moment with the deputies was actually the smallest problem she was about to face. You would think that being proven wrong in front of two sheriff's deputies would make most people back down. Normal people feel embarrassment. Normal people realize when they've pushed too far. But this woman? She doubled down. Her lips pressed together, eyes burning with that same arrogant certainty that had carried her this far. You think a few dusty papers are going to stop me? She snapped. The deputies exchanged a quick look. I stayed calm, because right then I realized something important about this woman. She wasn't just stubborn. She was desperate, and desperate people make mistakes. Big ones. She turned to the deputies and pointed at my cabin again, like a prosecutor presenting evidence. This structure is unsafe, she insisted. It's clearly deteriorating. It could collapse or cause environmental damage to the lake. The shorter deputy frowned slightly. Ma'am, it looks pretty solid to me. That's because you're not a building inspector. She shot back quickly. Then she pulled out her phone and waved it dramatically. I've already reported this property to the county safety department. Structural hazards, environmental concerns, illegal septic system. Now the taller deputy looked confused. You filed all those complaints today. Yes, she said proudly. I almost laughed, because she had just walked straight into the trap she didn't even know existed. You might want to reconsider that, I said calmly. Her eyes narrowed. And why would I do that? Because, I replied, every one of those complaints you just filed is now part of a recorded investigation. The deputies both looked at me. I continued. Yesterday I spoke with the county building office. That was true. Turns out they've received multiple complaints about my property over the past week. Her expression froze. They also confirmed something interesting. I added. The taller deputy leaned slightly forward. What's that? All the complaints came from the same person. I slowly looked at her, and every complaint listed violations that don't actually exist. The wind shifted again, carrying the smell of pine across the driveway. She crossed her arms. That's called reporting concerns. I shook my head. No. I looked directly at the deputies. That's called filing false reports with a government agency. Both deputies went quiet. Then I added the line that finally cracked the moment wide open. And according to Montana law, that's a criminal offense. The silence that followed was different this time. Heavier, because now the deputies weren't looking at me anymore. They were looking at her. And suddenly, the woman who had called the police was starting to look like the one in serious trouble. The moment the deputies started looking at her, instead of me, the entire balance of power flipped. You could actually see it happen. A few minutes earlier, she had been standing there like the queen of the neighborhood, waving rules and threatening fines. Now she looked like someone who had just realized the ground beneath her feet might not be as solid as she thought. But instead of backing down, she made the worst decision of the entire situation. She got angry. You can't threaten me with laws, she snapped, pointing a finger at me. I know exactly who you are. That caught the deputy's attention. Oh, the taller one said. She smirked like she had just revealed the winning card. Yes. Senior Special Agent Garrett Blackwood, FBI Cybercrimes Division. Both deputies slowly turned toward me. I shrugged slightly. No secret there. But she wasn't finished. And he's been abusing federal resources to intimidate residents. She continued loudly. Running background checks on neighbors, threatening legal action, using his badge to scare people. The accusation hung in the air like smoke. The deputies looked uncomfortable now, because accusations like that, against a federal agent, are serious. But what she didn't realize was that she had just walked straight into another trap. I tilted my head slightly. You really want to go down that road? I asked calmly. Her smile widened. Oh, I already have. She reached into her purse and pulled out a folded document. I filed a formal complaint with FBI Internal Affairs this morning. The deputies exchanged another glance. She was clearly proud of herself. By tomorrow morning, she continued, Your supervisors will be reviewing evidence that you've been misusing your authority to harass this community. For a moment I didn't say anything. Then I asked one simple question. Did you include your husband in that report? Her confidence flickered. What? Your husband? I repeated. The taller deputy looked between us. What husband? I slipped my phone out of my pocket and opened a personnel directory. Then I turned the screen toward them. Special Agent Marcus Ashford, I said. Both deputies leaned forward. Financial Crimes Unit, Helena Field Office. Then I looked back at her. Transferred here 6 months ago. Her face slowly drained of color. And then I delivered the sentence that hit harder than anything else that morning. He works directly under me. The silence that followed was absolute. The deputies stared at her. Then at me. Then back at her again, because the woman who had just tried to destroy my career had no idea she had just dragged her own husband straight into the middle of the disaster she created. For a few seconds, nobody said a word. The wind moved through the pine trees, the lake water lapping quietly against the dock. But in my driveway the silence was heavy enough to crush steel. Her face had gone completely pale. You're lying, she whispered. But it didn't sound confident anymore. It sounded desperate. I simply turned my phone screen back toward the deputies. Marcus Ashford's personnel file sat there in black and white. FBI badge number, Helena Field Office, Financial Crimes Unit. The taller deputy gave a low whistle. Well, that's awkward. Her mouth opened and closed like she couldn't decide what reality she was living in. My husband would have told me, she finally said. I shook my head slowly. Your husband is a good agent. Quiet. Professional. Does solid financial investigations. Then I paused. But something tells me he didn't know his wife was running a neighborhood intimidation campaign. The shorter deputy shifted his weight. Mom, are you actually married to Special Agent Marcus Ashford? She hesitated, just for a second. But that second said everything. Yes, she snapped. And when he hears about this harassment, that's the problem, I interrupted calmly. Now both deputies were watching closely. Because Marcus already knows. Her head jerked back. What? I slid my phone back into my pocket. I spoke to him this morning. That part was absolutely true. The previous night, after digging through property records and HOA documents, I had called him into my office. When I explained what had been happening at Whitefish Lake, the man looked like someone had pulled the floor out from under him. He had no idea. None. Now I looked straight at her. When Marcus saw the evidence, false violations, harassment complaints, attempted bribery of a county inspector, he didn't defend you. Her breathing grew shallow. What did he say? One of the deputies asked. I answered quietly. He asked for copies of everything. The wind rustled the trees again. Because here's the thing about federal agents. We take fraud seriously. Extortion even more seriously. But corruption involving government complaints, false reports, and coordinated property targeting. That's the kind of thing that turns into a full investigation. And standing there in my driveway, I could see the moment the truth finally reached her, the moment she realized this wasn't a neighborhood dispute anymore. This had become a federal problem, and the very next sirens coming down that road wouldn't be for me.